happened between then and now? Well, what we find out is that one of our contacts, Stan Deyo, who, by the way, Tom Horn gave us a great endorsement of Stan Deyo. Tom Horn, before his house burned down years ago, he had this big newspaper article from the UK. And standing on the cover with these other elite doctors and scientists, it's Stan Deyo, and they're giving him credit in the UK, public knowledge that he's working on anti-gravity craft. Now, the film that we did called The Hollow Earth Chronicles, we did a whole segment in that film on Operation High Jump. This was a joint task force between the American government, the British government, and the Australian government, headed by the U.S. and Admiral Byrd. They go down to Antarctica and what turns into a UFO battle. And their big plan got cut in half, and they had to come home early because we lost men, we lost ships. There's stories of UFOs coming up out of the water and just cutting ships in half with laser. I mean, just crazy stuff that you only see in movies. What's fascinating about this is that this was a joint task force with those same three governments that are now working together with Stan Deyo, the British, the American, and the Australians working together on alien technology yet again, years after Operation High Jump happened. Stan Deyo was working as a secret agent for the FBI in Australia inside of the deep underground military bases. And he said while he was in the program, he knew about the deal with Eisenhower. He knew in the program that President Eisenhower had made a deal with what they called alien entities. I believe that the evidence points to two events taking place, and these two events happened 1 year apart. The first one happened at Edwards Air Force Base, where Eisenhower disappears, and they call it a media blackout. It was kind of similar to when Hillary Clinton and President Obama disappeared and were at the Bilderberg meeting, but nobody knew where they were, and it was called a media blackout. People freaked out, right? Well, something similar happened here, where Eisenhower is no longer on radar, and they come back later and say, oh, well, he had a dental emergency, and so he had to go seek private dental care. Now, that happened, and then a year later, we have the Holloman Air Force Base event. Now, the thing about the Holloman event was that people were there who witnessed it. Holloman is where they were out on the landing strip, and you had UFOs landing, meeting with him, meeting took place with Eisenhower and others, and then those UFOs took off. Now, there were eyewitnesses who have come forward. I was just talking about this with Chad Riley because he found some videotapes from the 90s. This is before the internet was doing its thing. In the 90s, there were videos that were recorded, old VHS tapes of some of these disclosure type engagements. I don't know what you want to call it, but these are men that were there. They're decorated men from the government, and they're now speaking out that yes, UFOs were landing and taking off at Holloman Air Force Base in, I believe it was 1955. We do know that things began to be more apparent after Babylon working. Therefore, there were more things taking place where there was people seeking the entity. So what I believe happened was that the rift was open, the tear in the space-time continuum, if you will, a portal, Stargate was open, and the government got involved. The feds got involved. Once they began to communicate with the entities, there was now a relationship being built, and it was no longer shock value that there are these entities who want to work with us. So I think that was definitely an open door, no pun intended, for those entities to now be communicating with President Eisenhower years later. Not too many years later, but a few years later. They're now meeting with Eisenhower, and so the story goes like this. We're on the road trip. We're driving out to meet with Ray Boucher, who was contacted by the Department of Defense. This is really important. This is one of those like haymakers. The information that he gives us that he presented his full disclosure in our film Higher Entities. But we're driving there, we're having a discussion, and we decided let's just go ahead and let's run some cameras, while we're driving and talking. So we set up our production stuff in Darren's SUV. We're driving down the road, and we had this conversation about this Eisenhower deal. See, what I had heard and researched was a little different than what Darren had picked up in his research. And this is one of those scenes in the movie where it's just like, wow, like the stuff that came out was so organic and unbelievable. Apparently, there were two events that happened, and a lot of people blur them. A lot of people will mix it up with the Edwards Air Force Base and the Holloman. They're two separate events a year apart. That's so important. But the idea is that the gray aliens, on record, met with Eisenhower. And then you had this other group of entities known as like the Tall Whites or the Nordics They met with Eisenhower separately, and they warned him. They said, you do not ever want to make a deal with the gray aliens. They are deceptive. They are very deceptive. All they want to do is deceive you and enslave you. They're demonic, basically. I don't think they use the word demonic, right? Because they're all demonic. But they were warning Eisenhower never to enter into a covenant with the Greys. Well,
it's all right. Want to enslave you to the evil too. They're all playing both sides on purpose.
They were the good guys, the Greys were the bad guys. This is fascinating because if you fast forward into this idea of a coming deception, they had to already set the groundwork to create a good alien, good cop, bad cop. Because what we're dealing with here is a bunch of liars. Satan's a liar, his demons are liars. That's why when someone starts playing with a Ouija board, their grandmother starts talking to them. Well, it's not your grandmother, bro. That's a demon. Yeah. That's an entity who wants to deceive you. Mm-hmm. They want to steal, to kill, and to destroy. That's biblical. And we're also told as Christians, we got to be vigilant. We got to be sober-minded because Satan is our adversary. And the word Satan, the name Satan isn't really a name. We have this misconception that Satan, the devil with a red pitchfork. And in reality, Ha-Satan is the enemy, the adversary. Mm-hmm. And so when we say Satan, it could actually be referring to the whole team of demons and entities, fallen angels. And so what we have is we have the fallen angels, and now it's my personal belief. Let me just lay this out real quick. It's my personal belief based on the book of Revelation and based on me using a calculator and understanding some definitions. I was able to calculate that if a third of the angels fell with Lucifer, with Satan, the Satan, right? Mm-hmm. If a third of them fell with him, and that's also based on another passage of a third of the stars getting knocked down to earth. If that passage means what we think it means, and if we understand it correctly, a third of the angels fell with Satan. And you can do your math and figure out that equals somewhere between 30 to 50 plus million fallen angels on the surface of the earth. Now, out of that, some of them were put in chains. The Bible tells us this because the ones that committed sexual sin, the Genesis 6, they have been locked up in chains. We can read about this in Jude. But the ones that are not locked in chains, just think about it, 30 to 50 plus million fallen angels on the face of the earth. That's, I made the comment recently in an interview I did, that is more than the population of the largest state in America.
I mean, these are the gods of the nations. These are the ones who have been worshipped throughout time. These are the ones of the nations who they set up the groves and the high places and offered sacrifices to them. They've been presenting themselves to humanity throughout time under different names, but under the same descriptions of their characteristics. So when you look at it in those kind of terms, and to also answer your question about are they otherworldly or interdimensional, through the document 6751, we did find that back in the 40s even, they were saying that they were interdimensional beings. So that will parallel with what Scripture has to say of fallen angels. With Job, for instance, you have Job, and this kind of is a crossover between our first film, Hollow Earth Chronicles, and the latest Higher Entities. But in Job, you have, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. So on one hand, you have him being able to present himself before the Lord, but he also is able to, and that's the spiritual realm. That's the things that we can't access. There's a barrier that's been put in place. But Satan and these divine beings, with the divine council, they were able to hold an audience before the Lord. At the same time, Satan says here that he's allowed, or that he's been going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. So that's an interdimensional feat.
And by the way, Tom Horn, his brother-in-law, was murdered. He worked at Los Alamos. This is the first time he ever told the story publicly. He never spoke this story publicly. Matter of fact, he told his sister that he would not disclose the full story while she was still alive. Yet here he is. He worked it out to tell us the story in our film. His brother-in-law worked for Los Alamos. And interestingly, he married Tom's sister, who had alien encounters from the time she was about 13 years old. Not only did she suffer alien visitations and paralysis as a child, her daughter The next generation, when she entered into that age of puberty, she began to get attacked. And then her husband, this is where it gets crazy. He comes home one day. They start drinking, knocking back a few. One thing leads to another, which I found out a lot of times when people start drinking, they're able to pull things out of the recesses that they would never talk about. So many stories of alien abductions and demonic activity people are willing to talk about after they have a few drinks. Things that are in those deep recesses come out. Now, I'm not saying that to recommend or I'm just saying that a lot of the stories we find out about in our research comes from one guy having a few drinks, and then it just starts coming out. It's like the filter's gone. Long story short, and we give the full story in Higher Entities. It's a great story. Not great as in good, but it's very fascinating. He comes home, he and the wife start drinking, and she decides she's going to share some of her childhood history with him that he didn't know about. And if I remember correctly how it all went down, he comes out and says, well, this is crazy because we're actually working with this type of stuff at Los Alamos. Now, he gives her information that we don't know, but he disclosed to her what he was doing in the alien base, that the conspiracy theorists call an alien base. But now it doesn't really seem like a conspiracy theory anymore, because if it was just a theory, why would he have been killed 24 hours later? 24 hours after he shares what they were doing at Los Alamos, he disappears. No body found, nothing. They say that they've never seen him back in the offices, So she reaches out and she's like, where's my husband never came home from work. He left for work. He left our house. He drove, he went to Los Alamos, but he never came home. Well, she now wants to get her benefits just to help pay for all the expenses that he was bringing in money. He's no longer there, and he's been working hard. There's pension and guarantees that she's supposed to get. They won't give her anything because there's no body. Without a body, there's no death certificate. Without a death certificate, there's no benefits. So she's working for the federal government as well. She starts rattling the cage high up, and finally, once she starts dropping information that's putting fear in people, they, in order to shut her up, finally say, okay, you know what, here you go, here's your benefits, done. Now, that tells me that it's not a conspiracy theory. That there's actual fact to this. There's alien activity, demonic activity going on at Los Alamos, and it was so serious that they would have had his house bugged, and that they were tracking every discussion he had in that house. And that was the thing, was he was working in the DUM, the Deep Underground Military Base. From my understanding, he was working there, and he told her what he was working on. We don't even know what that was. That's what's so fascinating about this story, is that we don't even know what he disclosed, but it was something so serious that 24 hours later, he's dead. Again, we're dealing with the fallout of what took place at the Babylon Working. Babylon Work.
There's also the guy who said he was going to try to stop the aliens. He's working underground places, bunkers, just like this guy's describing. And he told his wife, and then he was going to try to do something. Somebody reported him or something, or it was had help bugs. He had over 100 and something guns, and they killed him.
Changed everything. I believe that was prophetic on the satanic timeline. That was a big deal. And so I do believe for a fact that Roswell was just another byproduct. And I also believe, based on another FBI document that we have in our stack of over 300, is that there were more than one craft. And I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say there was possibly 9 bodies according to one declassified document. This is going to lead us right into Ray Boucher. Ray Boucher is now bringing all of this current. We're no longer dealing with 1940s or 50s or 60s. We're dealing with, our lifetime, and this is where it just hits home. Ray Boucher is an ordained minister. He has been a Baptist minister, a Lutheran minister, and he's also known as a Lutheran exorcist. We're very particular about who we work with and who we yoke up with in ministry. And after talking with Ray and looking into him, he is extremely biblically sound. His theology is right in line with Scripture on all the majors that would matter. And so we did some homework on this guy. Tom Horn, Derek Gilbert, everybody that we talked to, people that I'm not even going to name, people that we talked to off the record, everybody kept...
So in other words, they also went and spoke to somebody who's like into devil worship, and the dude that's in devil worship also basically said, yeah, these are the entities that people are worshiping in Christianity and everything else. We worship the same ones. They worship the devil, they don't know it. But see, the Luciferians know who they worship. It's the ones who got you in Christianity. Y'all don't know who y'all worship. And all the outside nations are doing Christianity and doing all these other world religions. But yet, our Creator told us not to do what the pagans do. So therefore, if you're doing it, then you're pagan.
Kept saying, including Darren Geisinger and Chad Riley, they all said, you've got to talk to Ray Boucher. They said he was met with by two members of the Department of Defense because of his unique background as a minister, as an exorcist, and as the head of MUFON for his state, which is Nebraska. This is a guy who was heavily involved in the UFO community back before the internet was a thing. He would go to these meetings, he would read up, and back then it was like a videotape. It was like $60, like a documentary videotape. You pay $60. I mean, these were the days before the internet, before YouTube. Information was harder to get. But Ray Boucher was heavily involved in the UFO community back in the day. And so being the head of MUFON and also for his state, and also for being a minister and an exorcist and a UFO advocate, a UFO truth advocate, these two men contact him from the DOD. And they say, we really need to meet with you because of your unique standing. We need to meet with you, and we need basically we need you to consult with us about what some of this may be. So he met secretly with these members of the Department of Defense, and they told him that they were part of a non-existent group inside the DOD working on government facilities paid for by taxpayer dollars, and that they began to try to get answers to some of this stuff. And they began to engage in occult rituals to communicate with these entities. Now, let me explain this. If you don't feel like this is just a reoccurrence of the Collins elite, I mean, this is recent. This is happening in the modern time period. He says that their bigger group was engaging in what he called satanic rituals, and he even said that the DOD contacts hinted at human sacrifice being done on the taxpayer dollar behind closed doors on government facilities. He said they started off with, we just want to get answers. And he says, and that turned into a we can do better mentality. We can do more than this. We can go above and beyond. This is the same story you see when you're watching movies about famous drug dealers. Oh, we can do better mentality. Starts off, they're just selling a little dope. And before you know it, they're a kingpin, and they just want more and more and more. It's not that they need it anymore, but it's that we can do better mentality. We can't leave well enough alone. To quote Karate Kid, we cannot leave well enough alone, and we can do better, and we're going to do better, and we're going to get more technology, we're going to get more information, we're going to get more power, and we're going to rise up by the power of the entities. And so Ray Boucher explained to them that yes, this stuff was extremely demonic. That yes, y'all had a good idea. Basically, your instincts were correct. This is demonic and you don't need to be doing it. They knew that was the case, but they needed someone they could talk to, such as Ray Boucher with his unique background. And so he was able to meet with them, and I believe they met twice. They had some phone conversations. But the thing is Ray wouldn't meet with us originally. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He's a very friendly guy. He was willing to just be cordial and hello, nice to meet you. But when we told him we wanted him on camera and that we wanted to meet with him, it was like, well, I could probably work with you guys at some point. He says, but I'm really busy. It's kind of like the nice way of saying, sorry, can't help you. We continued to try to reach out to him. We began our investigation. We talked with Tom Horn and Derek Gilbert and these others. Derek Gilbert told us to go listen to an interview he did with a podcast. Dr. Future, I think, was the name of the show. And we listened to it, and at the very beginning of the podcast, the guy says, wow, we've been trying to schedule this with you for over a year, and you're finally coming on to talk with us. So I imagine Ray Boucher is extremely careful. He's very standoffish. He wants to protect his family. He doesn't want to get involved in something he shouldn't be. And so I just kind of wrote it off that he's not going to meet with us. And we're probably going to have to just go ahead and end this project early. He finally comes through and says, okay, I'll do it. But I'm not going to tell you where we're going to meet or what time we're going to meet. He says, plan on coming down and getting a hotel in the big city close by. So we did. We went down. We got a hotel in the big city. And it was a big city, by the way. This city was booming and busy. I mean, crazy busy the whole time we were there. We didn't know until the morning of what time we were going to meet and the fact that he was going to come to us at our hotel room. That's how secretive he is. And just to add a little bit of mystery to the situation, shortly after we got done releasing this film, I get word that Ray Boucher has been diagnosed with some strange, rare kind of cancer. So I say that to ask people to be praying for him. One of the bonus nuggets that we released in Higher Entities was there was a guy who had very high security clearance. I believe it was a lieutenant colonel. I forget. Chad Riley knows it was his contact. It wasn't our contact. And by the way, let me just give a quick shout out to Chad Riley. He's the guy who fishes up these documents that nobody's ever heard of. Like, we are blessed to have people are like, how do you even get some of this information? Well, we've got a guy on our team named Chad Riley, and he has a skill to where he fishes up these rare documents from the FBI vault that nobody's ever heard of. And so it's a blessing to have him on board, and he's also our co-producer. So having Chad on board, because somebody's going to wonder, how did you find document 6751? It was downloaded. You can only download it, like, if you don't know how to find it, you got to download it in a thick packet called the UFO packet number 1, which, by the way, is available on the FBI vault. The same FBI vault where they admitted that Hitler was alive in Argentina after World War II. People ask where we got that document that we showed in the Hollow Earth Chronicles. How we got it from the FBI. While I was doing an interview with Gon Shimura on Face Like the Sun YouTube channel, he goes to pull up the document. His IP address is blocked from accessing that document. He had to go in and change his settings live on the recording that we did. He had to change his browser settings just to access 6751. Now, I don't want to digress. This is so important. We're dealing with this idea of government agencies doing anything it takes to keep you from getting the Easter egg. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. They're trying to hide their Easter eggs. And so what happened here was Chad's contact, his name is Greg Renrich. He has the above top secret clearance, areas such as Groom Lake, Area 51, a list. Chad breaks down the whole list in Higher Entities. And so Chad was in contact with him through our other mutual contact, Kay Carswell, who's a dear friend of ours. Kay has become friends with Greg Renrich. They've interviewed him. I don't know if they've interviewed him publicly or just private, but he started to give Chad all this information that we were going to include in our film. And so the information was unbelievable, and I'll give that information away here in a second, but I want to just say he was supposed to be in our film. At some point, he just decides he's going to just fall off the face of the earth and back out. And so we're trying to get answers, like what's going on with Greg Renrich. I mean, he was a prime interview. We needed him. This guy's been down in the underground bases with the entities. See, Stan Deyo didn't work directly with entities. His colleagues worked with the entities. Wow. So Stan's was hearsay, trustworthy hearsay, but he didn't work with the entities. This guy, Greg Renrich, worked in the base with entities that called themselves the Nephilim. They were 9-10 feet tall entities, and they told him that they were preparing for an intergalactic war with God, and that they were going to win. They believed they were going to win. Furthermore, Greg Renrich is on record saying that he had to sign an affidavit before he could go in this facility, that he wouldn't even use the name Jesus, even as a cuss word, in this deep underground military base. And this goes right back to what Joe Jordan said.
You know, the thing is that wouldn't even matter because the devil would just laugh at him anyway. Because that name is Mr. Z, who's the double son. So that would have made a difference. So when they doing that, that's to play at their head to make them believe in something that's not even freaking ours, man. Like,
says is that hundreds of cases of alien abduction completely halted at the name of Jesus being proclaimed. Even if he stubbed his toe as a cuss word, he couldn't say Jesus.
I'll go back to the quote from Aleister Crowley. We mentioned this in the film, but he says
now
that...
listen, right? Sometimes when people come to tell you some truth, they know some truth, they like to put the lie in there. You can guarantee if he was able to do this and tell this much truth, he's paid by the government to let some of this stuff out. Their main thing with him was that he kept on pushing that Mr. J name to deceive you in that segment. That's what their goal was. You don't care about that. What you want to do is say, fuck that Mr. J name. We ain't dealing with that. We don't deal none of those names. What we're going to do is focus on the creator, and we're going to focus on getting the meat, and we're going to throw away the bones that he keeps spitting out his mouth.
Today we're calling them angels and demons. Tomorrow we'll call them something else. So we could, in the world standards, we can call them aliens. In the world standards, we can call them ascended masters, light beings, give them a name. But scripturally, I'll go back to the same beings that were depicted in Genesis 6, but even more so, fine-tuning it to the Table of Nations. What happened at Babel was God, he disinherited the nations, and he accounted them, he allotted them to the number of the sons of God.
It's kind of similar to what the Freemasons believe. When you work your way up into Freemasonry, you believe that it's compatible with your faith. And in reality, it's really not compatible with anyone's faith. It's its own faith. But you don't know that at the lower levels. You know, it's a universalist group. You know, when you take that first initiation, you are agreeing that all paths lead to the great architect, you know, what they call God, the eye of providence. As you work your way up, I think it's the 28th degree, somewhere between the 28th and the 30th, if I remember correctly. I just had this conversation the other night with my buddy Brett, and you have this understanding that the Bible is good and it's the Word of God, but when you get to the 28th to the 30th degree, you find out that the role gets reversed, and that Lucifer was actually the underdog. He was the good God that really did all the good creation, that really did. He had the best. He had basically our best interest at heart. It's Gnosticism, and so Jesus, they believe, is.
No, see, and that's the devil's trick. The devil plays both sides. So the devil try to make him think that he's a good guy when he's not. That's what he does. And then Mr. J, who also is your tall right demon devils, try to say, don't trust that guy. We're good guys. This guy will give you bad stuff, but you know, we'll help. We'll give you good stuff. They both want to enslave you. They're playing good guy and bad guy, good cop, bad cop. All the names of the devil. Religion is of the devil. It's all a trick to get you to call the names. Soul ties.